try to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about the creation of web applications with Vue.js 3 and ASP.NET Core 5. Both of them are new technology just released. Despite .NET 5 is in preview for more than almost a year right now, and it was released on November, the production release. Is still being like a quite new technology. So until we have the .NET 6 on November this year at some point, that's the newest technology in the Microsoft stack. The same for Vue.js 3. So Vue.js 3 is still kind of in preview, but I'm using in production already because the new version doesn't have breaking changes a comparison to Vue.js 2, which is great, and it's a really good point of Vue.js as well if you will compare with Angular and React. Mainly Angular has been having like many breaking changes in the last years since its creation, and that's a point of consideration regarding Vue.js as well. So for who don't know me, probably much all of you probably don't know me. Complementing what he said about me, these are my contacts, personal ones, but they are public profiles for technical communities. So I constantly share content about Vue.js, .NET, Blazor, Entity Framework, SQL Server, etc. on these profiles. Feel free to connect with me there and keep in touch. If you have any questions, even after this presentation, feel free to contact me. I'll be glad to talk with you. And I participate in technical community since I started my career almost 15 years ago. I like to share knowledge. I like to share knowledge with the community and give to the community the knowledge back that I've been taking from other people. I think it's a great thing for everyone. So, and congratulations for the organizers of .NET the core meetup because the community needs that. So I'm responsible for some communities in Ireland and Brazil, and I'm part of Microsoft MVP program as well under the developer technologies category. So let's talk about first, before we jump to a demo using .NET 5 and Vue.js 3, about web architecture models. That's the traditional, or at least I call as traditional web architecture. That it's been in the market since the beginning of web development, which consists in a browser or a client request sent to something to the server. The server process absolutely everything. So access the database, process the data, runs logical statements using C#, Java, PHP, or any language in the server side. And once this process is complete, the server application returns everything to the client, includes HTML, CSS, images, JavaScript files, content from a database in whatever format is being processed, extra files. But in the traditional web architecture, each happens every single request. So each time the user changes to another page, a new cycle of HTTP requests starts, and the entire page is downloaded again. So I think it's common sense that that's not a good approach nowadays because of scalability problems, and bad user experience as well, because a simple page with images, CSS files, and dynamic content from database may have like 2 MB size, etc. So each request that's gonna take a lot of networking traffic and this kind of thing. So it's not a good approach, but the market is still having a lot of projects using that approach. And even new applications is still being using this kind of architecture, considering some teams or companies doesn't have knowledge in single page applications and other newer technology. So it's still pretty common, even it's not so recommended nowadays. And as I said, the biggest problem with this approach is scalability. So if you have like thousands, millions of requests, the only way to scale is to increase the power of the server. You can scale up or scale, creating multiple instances of the server. However, um, you are going to spend a lot of money doing that, because all the process is being done in the server directly. So it's pretty complicated to handle millions of requests, millions of users. So it's challenging, considering the cost point of view. And we have the most modern approach, or one of the most modern approaches, which you already know, single page application, uh, using Vue.js, Angular, React, and you have many others, JavaScript frameworks, and you have Blazor right now that we can run WebAssembly on the client side. And why this is a good approach for a high performance web application? Because the costs for download of the application, the JavaScript files, the CSS, much of the images will be paid once by the user in the first request, and between the route to different pages or different components, there is no server request for the entire page anymore. Only the specific tiny piece that is going to be taken from the server is transferred. So we are talking about API JSON requests, or even more modern approach like gRPC requests or SignAware, etc. So uh, you can scale in a much better way, because you don't need to host a lot of logic from the application, from the front end side on the server. Once it downloads, you can handle a lot of stuff on the client side, and you can control better the workload you do on the server. So regarding .NET Core, .NET Framework, and ASP.NET Framework in general, that's the timeline for ASP.NET web application. So I worked literally with all of them over the time, uh, even with like the ASP pages, the traditional ASP using VB script. So before ASP.NET was created. So if we take a look in this timeline, much of the applications on the market is still using ASP.NET MVC approach, ASP.NET MVC 5, 4, 3, etc. Because after Microsoft created ASP.NET MVC, everyone realized that ASP.NET Web Forms the technology, the previous technology uh, was really complicated to scale, to maintain, to have like multiple developers working in the same project because you have conflicts in control version and this kind of thing. So gradually, Microsoft was moving from server side to client side, and now with .NET Core, we have Blazor in place. So you have an alternative for building single page applications using Microsoft technologies. If you don't wanna use Angular, React, or Vue.js, so that's an alternative. However, it's still not popular. It's stable. It's ready for production. The Blazor WebAssembly, but it's not so easy to find a Blazor developer as you find a JavaScript developer who knows Angular, React, or Vue.js. So that's a point to consider. But one thing I wanna highlight here on .NET 5 is the fact that this it is not only about a major release for .NET Core. If you compare to .NET Core 3.1, it's about improvements in literally everything regarding C Sharp. So you have performance improvements on Entity framework, on string, on native methods for C Sharp in general, and you have dependency injection, better life cycle for HTTP requests, and a lot of things that uh, Microsoft has been improving since the first version of .NET Core, and .NET 5 represents like the most high level quality that Microsoft has done so far. And I have some production systems using .NET 5 in the backend, ASP.NET Core Web API with Vue.js 3 on the front end, and I'm able to process millions of requests in a simple Azure web app with like less than 2 GB memory and with like a little CPU only. So that's a pretty great technology to combine. And going back to the ASP.NET versions, we had ASP.NET Web Forms. Of course, it's a legacy. Microsoft doesn't support that anymore for updates for a long time already. So it runs exclusively on the server, everything, including views. ASP.NET MVC runs on the server only. ASP.NET Razor pages as well. ASP.NET Web API that doesn't have Vue but runs completely on the server. Blazor server, which uses WebAssembly at some point, but 99% of the process is still depending on the server. And we have finally Blazor WebAssembly, the most modern web framework from .NET platform. So as you can see here, apart from the newest version of Blazor, the Blazor WebAssembly, if you choose whatever choice you make here, you are gonna run almost the entire process on the server as the traditional web architecture states. So it's hard to scale. Because of that, I highlighted here the ASP.NET Web API because it's a really good alternative for high performance and scalable systems to use ASP.NET Web API with .NET 5, bringing all the improvements presented on .NET 5, and running Vue.js, could be Angular or React, any single page application in the front end, because it runs faster on the client side and there's no payload between the client and the server. So to work with Vue.js, as you have similar what you do with React and Angular, you have to have the Node, the most recent Node version installed. It's recommended because you are going to use npm package to run the application, to install packages, etc. And the Vue.js a Vue.js component is based basically in the same way, similar way Angular and React works. You have template, JavaScript, and CSS, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. You can combine all of them in the same file or in separate ones. For small projects, I do prefer to keep in the same file for simplicity. But for more complex projects, I prefer to keep there in separate, using even combining with TypeScript because of testability and automation tests, this kind of thing. So, but you have this option. That has like the standard structure for web components. So if you know already know Angular and React or similar JavaScript framework for single page application, you are going to adapt easily to Vue.js. And I would say it's the most simple one because it doesn't have like so many configurations to make and the complex structure depends on the system. So the demo we are going to make now in about 30 minutes. I will try to cover as much as I can about Vue.js and .NET 5 with ASP.NET Core Web API. And we are going to make two distinct components. One calling API from the backend regarding forecast. We have similar approach natively on Visual Studio templates made by Microsoft using Angular and React. And I built my own template and I shared in the Visual Studio Marketplace. I'm gonna share with you later. If you wanna like save some steps, I will do it here. But it's important to understand how you can build from scratch this kind of structure in case you have to adapt or customize something. So let's demo. I'm gonna create from scratch here web ASP.NET Core Web API. So in case that will take time, I'm gonna take already projects already because I have this demo ready. Uh, in case some connection issues happens. So I have the latest version of Visual Studio installed here with .NET 5. I'm gonna leave with that name, no problem. So in the next step for creating ASP.NET Core application, you have some options here. So as I said, there is the option for Angular and React here, and React with Redux. So we are going to work here to make similar approach, but with Vue.js. I don't know the reason why Microsoft doesn't have a native template for that, but we are going to make our own template right now. I'm gonna choose this ASP.NET Core Web API because it doesn't have uh, views structure and models as we don't need them. Let me drag and drop this off from this screen. So I'm gonna not support Open API, neither HTTPS. Let's create. So when you have ASP.NET Core Web API projects in .NET 5, .NET Core 3.1, and whatever version you have. Let me change here. So the template has a standard structure with some examples for the API. I'm gonna keep this forecast because it's faster for us to demonstrate API calls. But one thing we have to change in this web API project to work combined with Vue.js and backend at the same time is about in roles, because web API you have to specify the role scheme for each controller, etc. And we have to make sure they will not conflict with Vue.js roles. They don't share the same road structure. So you have to configure the roads for the Vue.js application and for the web API. But first of all, let's create the Vue.js application itself. I'm gonna create here actually in the root folder of the web API. For big projects, I prefer to have this in a separate solution because usually like one team is working on the front end side and another one is working on the back end side. But for small projects like that, I don't see any problem to work in the same projects. Let me switch from the correct screen. Let me open the command line again. So I have Node installed on my machine and Vue's CLI. So you have to make sure you have this installed on your machine. The first thing, considering we are in the root folder of the web application, we can create a Vue.js application. I'm gonna call client app. This is the standard command for Vue CLI. So Vue creates the name of the application. That's gonna create a folder for your application, and with some configurations you would like to. So that's gonna ask which version of Vue.js you wanna use. I'm gonna choose Vue.js. As you can see here, it's still in preview. So it's not like 100% production ready, but I don't see any problem to use already. And after choosing the version, that's gonna install all the npm packages associated with the unstandard Vue.js application, and that's gonna create a standard template as well with some components as an example. That may take a while, depends on your internet connection. I do prefer to do that from scratch in the presentation because you see the whole process. If we had some connection problems, I would take the ready application I have. And while this is running here, we can take a look in the changes we have to make on the web API projects in order to adapt for Vue.js or single page applications. Let me minimize here. So in the web API projects, if you want to work with single page applications, you have to, for Vue.js specifically, you have to install a specific package created by community. It's not officially by Microsoft, but I've been using for like years already since Vue.js was created. So Vue CLI middleware. So this guy here, I'm gonna use the latest version. So that's gonna give you the same extension methods for single page application configuration as Microsoft already provides for Angular and React. So it's exactly the same or has exactly the same purpose. So, okay, that's ready. Let me take a look on the console here. So it's everything ready. So on the startup from the web application here, we have to make some specific changes in order to tell to the web API application that we are going to share roles with a single page application for deployment configuration as well, and for static files. So the first thing we are going to do is tell to in the configurations that we are going to use not only controllers from the web API, but static files from the web application as well. As you can see here, after we run the Vue create command, it created our application here under the client app folder with the standard configuration and standard folders. So I'm going to refer the same path for the Vue.js application. After that, you have to specify that you are going to use single page application static files. And finally, the last configuration you have to make, you have to indicate to the application, to the web API, that you are going to use a single page application, passing the source path here, which in our case is client app, and the path for the production, I would say, environment, which is the gist folder. So, and GIS use Vue CLI is not recognized for the standard and the native extension methods because it's presented on the new package we just installed. I'm gonna reference here. So as you can see here, there is the reference here now. I'm gonna clean up the unused usings. And what's happening here is once we are in debug mode, the application is going to run an npm script to launch the Vue.js application at the same time and handle and it will handle the proxy between the web API application and the web application for the front end side, which is a Vue application. If you run real quick, just before we change the Vue.js application, let's see what it looks like. If you haven't run or have created the Vue.js application in a different way, this build process should consider run the npm install commands, but we don't need to because we just created from scratch and it's already there. So that's the default API for the backend. But if we change here to the root, it's building. It's gonna handle here the Vue.js application. So as you can see here, there is no route in the web API for the route path. So it's combining already the route configuration from the Vue.js application and ASP.NET web API. However, we are gonna make now some changes in the Vue.js application in order to demonstrate better uh, as deep as we can how we can build components in Vue.js applications. The first thing we are going to do in the Vue.js application is to install specific packages to work with roads, to use Bootstrap, because it's my uh, my my preference for this demo. No reason. And the Axios library for Vue.js in order to work with uh, Ajax calls. So I'm gonna run the terminal again in a new instance, and we are already on the right folder. And to install the any packages you want, you can use npm. The first one we need to install is the Vue router package, and I'm going to specify here, instead of a specific version, I'm going to use at next, because I want to use the version of the library compatible with Vue.js 3 preview. So that's important. So let's run and see what we get. That's gonna be much faster than the Vue.js creation. So that's ready. The next one we are going to install, it's the library responsible for the Ajax calls, get, post, etc. That this library, we don't need the at next suffix, because it's compatible. Any version is compatible with any version of Vue.js, so no compatibility problems. And after this is complete, we are gonna install Bootstrap, npm install Bootstrap. So the spell is wrong. Now is right. I won't specify any version. That's gonna take the latest one. So for at least for this demo, or for the must-based things you are going to do with Vue.js, the first two ones are the most essential ones. You have other libraries, alternative libraries to handle roads and API calls on Vue.js, but I would say these two are the most popular ones. So we can close this one. So after installing the necessary packages, we are going to change the main application, the main JS application. So if we go to public here, that's gonna have the the, the static files from the application. If we go to CRC folder, there is a folder for our components, for our assets, and this main JS file here, where we can specify the configurations for all the libraries or resources we want to use in our Vue.js application. And but just before we change this file, I'm gonna create two distinct components here. One called counter. As I showed you on my last slides, we are going to create two different components, one counter and another one for weather forecast. I'm gonna call that counter. And another one, the spell is wrong. I'm gonna fix that. And I'm gonna call another one as fetch data. I'm gonna fix the name of that as a counter. So that's how a component in Vue.js looks like. So you have the template, which contains the HTML, so standard HTML here, and you have a JavaScript block to handle the logic associated with the components, and you have a style block as well. You can use not only CSS for this component, but you can use global ones as well. But usually I use Sculpt to keep this style only for this component. So considering we already have like these two components here, we are going to change and configure the main JS file. I have this ready here for saving time. One thing we are going to do is specifying import the Bootstrap CSS library, and specifying here the path of the router configuration, which we are going to make. And I'm telling here to the Vue.js configuration that I want to use this router configuration. And this mount app here, it's basically the main tag of the index HTML file. You wanna render the entire Vue.js application. It's a custom one, but I'm gonna leave the default value here. So these are the only changes we have to make in the main JS file. And to configure our roads, like you have road configuration for ASP.NET MVC applications and Angular, React, etc. I'm gonna create a specific folder here to handle code router to have then all the configurations we need for the roads. I'm gonna create a JavaScript file here to have this in a separated file. I'm gonna call index.js. So in this file, we are gonna specify all the components we wanna render using the specific URL path. So if you have a component that's gonna be rendered as a child component uh, in a page, you don't need to specify these components as a road, but that's not our case for this demo. So I have this ready here. What basically I did is I made a reference to each component we have, but instead of home here we have hello world. I'm gonna change here hello world. Let me check. Okay, the spell is right. And I'm referencing here the Vue route, the npm package we installed at beginning. And regarding the route configuration, you have to specify path, the name of the route, and the component that's going to be associated with this route as a parent component. So in this case, we have only three, which means that the root path is going to render the home controller, which is hello world. And if the user types in the URL /counter, that's going to render the counter components, and the same for fetch data. And here I'm specifying some configurations regarding the type of roads I want to make. I'm using create web history because every time the user changes to another roads, as a single page application doesn't refresh the entire application, I want to record in the browser web history each road the user is navigating to. So I think we have everything ready. So in the counter components, I'm gonna remove all this content here, and I'm gonna copy and paste already components I already have. So the template is gonna have a button here, and each time the user clicks on this button, I'm gonna fire the increment counter methods. And this increment counter methods is incrementing the current count variable property here. So it's a simple one, just to start. And as you can see here, I'm creating the current count variable or property here for the components, and I'm referring here using mustache syntax. So that means Vue.js components are shoe-bind components. So whatever change you happens on these variables is going to reflect on the template. So and whatever change on the template is going to could affect as well the logical statement here. So it's reactive basically. So we have this simple component here. Let's run to see if everything is working fine. If you have any changes on the Vue.js site while the application is running, by default, the Vue create application command specifies the hot reload configuration set as a true. So you are gonna see like the browser reloading the application while you are changing a Vue.js file or any JavaScript file inside the Vue.js application. It's running, it's trying to take the Vue.js application. Okay, as you can see here, the slash, the root of the application runs the hello world components. If we type counter here, something is missing. Let's see. So I know what's missing. We have to tell to the app view file that we want to use roads as we usually do with like layout page in ASP.NET MVC or master page with the real legacy ASP.NET web forms. Let me take here the roach view command. So instead of this hello world, I'm gonna specify this router view. So I'm assuming this app view file is kind of the master layout, and that's gonna combine the each components of being the roach configuration. So let's see what it looks like. I'm gonna call counter here. It's loading. In my case, I have multiple instances of Visual Studio running on my machine right now. So, but in our machine, developing one application at the time, it won't be so big deal. Let's wait. I'm gonna run in another tab, another instance. So while it's running, let's adapt the another components as well, which is fetch data. As I did with the other one, I'm gonna remove all the content and take from another place. So let me see how application. Let me restart the application here. So basically, when you combine Vue.js and ASP.NET Web API application, you are running in your machine two web processes at the same time, one for the backend and another one for the front-end development. And uh, so you are running two distinct web servers, I would say, in our machine locally in development mode. So that runs. I'm gonna call counter again. So as you can see here, each respects the contents of the app, which is the Vue.js logo, and it runs here, or components. And as you can see, it is reactive. And if we change to fetch data, uh, this is how it looks like. But let's take a look on this fetch data component because it has more things. So basically, this fetch data is calling an API from the controller, which is this get method here. So what I did here is I configured uh, a bootstrap table, a standard one, and for each forecast, I'm looping in a for. If you already developed an Angular application, it's like NG4. Vue.js has the same pattern, V4, VIF, V whatever you want to do. The syntax is pretty similar. And in this script content here, I'm referencing the access to work with API calls. I created a forecasts array, and I created a method get weather forecasts calling the API, which in our case is slash weather forecast. And once the response is being taken from the API, I'm populating the forecast array with the response. And doing that, the automatically the state of the component changes because it's reactive what's happening uh, in this in the stage of this array. And so whatever time you change something on this array, that's going to reflect automatically here. So it's pretty fast and powerful and pretty easy to work with Vue.js. So as you can see here, like in a quick demo, we don't have time to get deeply on that, but the only thing apart from some configurations on the startup project here, uh, it's pretty much standard we are doing with Razor because the syntax is pretty similar, and but is using a similar syntax. So if you uh, have experience with Razor, you are gonna find pretty easy to work with Vue.js as well. In case you don't have uh, you want to save time for creating Vue.js applications with .NET Core, you can download a Visual Studio extension I created already. I have for .NET 5 and ASP.NET Core 3.1. What that does is that's gonna create for you from scratch all everything configured for ASP.NET Core Web API. As you can see here, Vue.js 3 with .NET 5. You don't need to make any configuration I did manually here. Installing packages, configuring router, configuring API calls, etc. And the result of this template is exactly the same the demo I showed you. So there is the counter components, the route configuration, the weather forecast fetch data components as well. So I'm running out of time right now. So I'm gonna jump to some questions that you may have. Uh, I'm not able to see the chat while I'm
Yeah.
sharing the screen. I don't know why.
No, yeah. So you can hear me all right, can you?
Yeah,
Yeah, good. Well, firstly, yeah, cheers. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, that was great. There has been a few questions which have filled up the comment box over the talk. There's one at the very beginning, which was from Matt. He said he's interested to know your thoughts on React server components and Hotwire. They're both pretty new and are moving back to server side for rendering. He said he's only heard about them and he hasn't really got any detailed knowledge at the moment.
yeah. I'm watching this initiative closely because I'm seeing many companies and open source projects trying to maximize what they are sending to the client side. So, despite it's a server side render process that has the purpose to maximize the things you can do on the client side. So I think it's different from what Blazor has the purpose to do, but I think Angular and Vue.js will come to that or to this alternative at some point as well, because it makes sense to compile as much as you can and send only like pre-processed content to the client.
Okay, cool. And yeah, so I'm not really sure how you're going to answer this, but Mehmet mentions that he knows Vue 3 is in TypeScript, but he didn't see anything about TypeScript in here.
Yeah, so I didn't want to bring TypeScript on here because of the time basically. So but I with Vue.js 3 in production environments, I usually prefer to use TypeScript because of it makes my life easier to write tests. So in my opinion, that should be the default choice for Vue.js 3 applications. And I feel that's gonna be at some point, despite like many Vue.js developers don't like so much TypeScript because it looks like Angular for them. So, but I don't agree. I think we can combine, and it's been a great couple.
Cool. Then Mark asks, your examples are using IIS. What other options are available that would support deployment on Linux?
Um, Considering you are developing under .NET 5, which is multi-platform, and Vue.js doesn't need a server actually, because you can store a Vue.js application in a storage, OneDrive, you don't need a server, so you can deploy literally anywhere. So there is no restriction for that. So because it's built on top of .NET 5, so it's completely compatible.
Cool. And then just obviously conscious of time, this will be the last question. Of course, everything else, I'm sure they can get you on social media. But yeah, the last question from Sumit. Sumit asks, if we're starting a new SPA project with .NET Core, what would you recommend out of Vue, React, and Angular?
I'm suspect to say because I love Vue.js. I worked with Angular and with React as well, more with Angular than React. React is just one project. However, uh, I think the curve of learning for Vue.js it's much smaller because you don't need to use TypeScript if you don't want. The configuration is simple. The component structure is simpler than React and Angular. Because of that, I think it's the best option right now. And other than that, the Angular community is fighting each other for a long time because of the breaking changes of each release as well. So many people are not so happy with Angular in the last years, and they are migrating to React and Vue.js. The React, it's a good option too, but if you have to build a really complex Code application, that's going to be harder to make that in React than Vue.js because of React structure. The life cycle of uh, components in React, it's hard to track, really hard to work on in complex projects.
Cool. Well, yeah. So I think that'll be it. As I mentioned, of course, if you do have any more questions, Alex, of course, put his socials towards the front of the video, and I'll post them out afterwards as well. Yeah, thanks, Alex. That was a really good talk. I know we had a lot of people stay on to the end for this one. For everyone which is still on the call, I'll be releasing the next few events towards the end of next week. Normally, I tend to put them out at this point, but we've got a few more people I wanna confirm. Obviously, up next we have Dennis Duman, who's going to be doing his talk on test-driven development and how to do it without shooting yourself in the foot. So that will be in exactly 2 weeks' time from today. So everyone who's here at this point, I hope to see you there. The video from this event will be up before the end of the week on our YouTube. Just keep an eye on your emails for the event announcement and, of course, the YouTube link. But yeah, thanks everyone for turning up. Thanks again, Alex. That was really great. And yeah, I'll see everyone in the next one.